But what you do is an art form too. I mean, and it is a lot of, that's the thing about art is it's a community. It's not just the art, the people making the art, quote unquote, making the art, right? Like what you do, there's an art to what you do. I think there's an art to everything, but it's like this sort of symbiotic relationship. It's a community and it's a sort of big, you know, if you allow it to be, it becomes this sort of big sort of organism in and of itself, it just grows and grows.
Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
Welcome back to The Truth in This Art, your source for conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thank you for joining me. Today, I am super excited to be in conversation with my next guest, who is an electro-punk performance artist who critiques corporate culture and workaholism, addressing their impact on mental health while blending music and performance art to challenge societal norm. Please welcome Ryan Havers, also known as Ears with Eyes. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rob. How's it going? Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you for coming on, man. It's a treat. I've there's a quirkiness, there's an interest there. There is as far as your works, I'm ready to dive in, and we've been able to talk a little bit before we actually get to the podcast in earnest. So I want to for the benefit of the listeners, I want to go backwards.
Okay.
And could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your work?
Sure. I'm Ryan Havers. I have a moniker that I go by called Ears with Eyes. It's a solo project that I started in about 2019.
Yeah.
I think around the pandemic. And it was basically I've been playing music for 30 years. I started when I was 14 playing guitar, and I was bitten by the bug pretty early on. Like, I remember the very first chord. I mean, it was just like, oh, I want to feel that all the time. Like, that's what I'm doing. That's it.
Yeah.
So I've been playing in bands and recording and a little bit of touring and stuff like that for quite some time now. But I don't feel as though I had a real sort of artistic vision until I started Ears with Eyes.
Yeah.
And it was really just unfiltered me, just for fun.
Yeah.
To really, it's like therapy, it's just like, these are the things that that just aggravate me, that are frustrating. And to really sum it up, it's a commentary on corporate America, corporate culture, workaholism, and really sort of that parlays into mental illness and how all that, just constantly working can affect your mental well-being.
Thank you. That's good. I definitely connect to it when I watch, let's say sci-fi or read like sci-fi books, and there'll be stuff from like the 50s. And they're like, oh, you got a time to put those credits in, make sure you're working these extra hours. And I'm like, oh, it is just a scam. I start looking at it. And as a person who is a workaholic, I like to be busy. I like to, it got to a point where, and this is peeling back the curtain, in real life, I'm almost 40, I'm 39. And, when I was 24, I was burnt out because of that, 2 years out of college, workaholic. Now, this is where it's really interesting. That's where I found podcasting.
Yeah.
I was like, I can do this myself and put that effort and that energy in something I actually love and I care about. And it just feels like I'm just having fun versus I'm working, you know what I mean? And I'll probably touch on that a little bit more later, but that's one of those things where I think I was fortunate to be aware of this notion of just the burnout, the whole overworking and the corporate culture. I had a corporate job, like corporate marketing job at a big Fortune 50 company.
Yeah.
This is not the jam for me. So before, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. So the name Ears with Eyes, what's the significance? Where does that come from?
I wish I had a better story, but so what many people have told me over the years that, the music that I write evokes some imagery. Or I've been told it's cinematic,
Yeah.
Not traditional cinematic like orchestral, but people have said, oh, I could see this in a show. I could see this in a movie. So I was really ears with eyes, just to back up a little bit.
Sure.
It became my solo moniker,
Yeah.
but I started it as a side hustle for music for media,
Yeah.
to write music for film, TV, movies, whatever, corporate logos, stuff like that. And never, I think I've had one client since then, so it never really, you know, but I just thought, okay, I have ears that have eyes. I have ears with eyes.
Got it.
So it's like the music I write is visual or visually invoking.
I like it.
Yeah.
My partner, she makes fun of how small my ears are. You can't see them with these cans, and I have glasses, so it's like 2 ears, 4 eyes. It's no, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. We'll workshop it. It's fine.
I'll tell you what though, like it's kind of like the worst name because nobody can remember it. Everyone's like, "Oh, hey, how's eyes and ears?" or "ears and eyes" or "ears," and I'm just like, that I should. But at this point, rebranding it and all that stuff is like, it is what it is.
I like it. It's in those 15 attempts to get my intro right, I definitely flipped it. I was like, I gotta get this right. That's so I think we have our starts, right? Those sort of initial moments that we're interested in. Like I can look back when I was interested in sort of my first creative thing. I wanted to be an illustrator. That's what I wanted to do. And obviously it was like seeing comics and cartoons. And I was like, man, I want to do that one day.
Yeah.
And then when I got to sort of this stage of podcasting, I, probably before podcasting, maybe 10 years before it became something I would do in this sort of way, I had the little recorder, like one of those jerks from these 80s movies, click, leave note to self. So that's the proto experience of me going into this. How did, what was that moment, like super early, that you even looking at an instrument? Maybe it wasn't always guitar, but, you said 30 years, right? So is there something like probably maybe 31 years ago that it was just like, okay, this is a creative thing. I know that a creative life or an artistic life is going to be something that's in your future.
Yeah. So just to date myself, I'm 46. So I was like early teens, like 13, 14 in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I had a Walkman, which is also dating myself, right?
Yeah.
For people who are younger, a Walkman is a cassette player that you had in your hand that you could put a cassette tape in. Yeah. And I just loved music. I was listening to it all the time. And also, at that time, you're starting to change, you're hitting puberty, you're trying to find yourself. I had played sports. I was okay at it, but it wasn't, I was kind of aimless, and I was a quiet kid.
Yeah.
Music just really kind of was like a magnet for me. I was constantly listening to my cassette tapes. And I just remember in my parents' kitchen, just pacing the floor, like whatever at night, just listening back and forth, listening to the same songs. I would get obsessed with certain songs and I'd be like air guitaring with it. And then one day I just woke up and I was like, maybe I should try guitar.
Yeah.
Like I was just like, this sounds so cool. I don't understand how they do it. Like it was like a problem I wanted to solve, It's like, how do they do that? How does it sound so cool? And so a friend of mine, I remember my best friend, Dave, he was away for the summer. He was visiting his family somewhere, and I was like, hey man, do you have that guitar? Can I borrow your guitar? He's like, yeah, just ask my mom. Okay. So I went to his house, borrowed the guitar. I didn't know any. I didn't know what I was doing,
Yeah.
and like I was like just turning the tuning pegs, and I broke a string, and I thought I broke the guitar. I like that's how little I knew about guitar. I didn't know you could just replace the string. I was like, oh my god, I just broke Dave's guitar. I don't know.
Oh no.
My dad was like, no, he wasn't a musician, but he knew enough to be like, yeah, we can just replace the string. I was like, oh geez. And then a good friend of mine, Jeff, his dad played guitar, and he played guitar, and they taught me my first chords, and they let me borrow their acoustic. They had an acoustic guitar, and yeah, just it turned out I had pretty good ear, and I just was like, I just couldn't put it down. Once I started, I couldn't. I was just obsessed with it, and it was just sort of like the clouds had parted, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So I can't help but notice in the background multiple guitars, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So what is your sort of like, we all have our different like favorites. Like for instance, I generally use Zoom recording devices. That's my
yeah,
preference. I have a few like Rode mics, but generally it's Zoom. That is my preference. I've used Behringer and all of that different stuff. When you start talking
yeah.
here, what is your like favorite like guitar? Like, sometimes and maybe if you remember the one that you thought you broke, what type that was, but what is your go-to guitar?
Well, the one that I broke was a Harmony, which is like a bottom of the line. It's like you could get it for like back in the day, like $50 or something like that. It was like a very, you know, um, but it was like and it was white with a black pick guard. It was just so basic looking.
Yeah.
But now I think about that and I'm like, man, I wish I had that guitar. It'd be cool to play it now.
Yeah.
Um, I have, different guitars have different sounds and have different feels. And, but I have, so there's a company Squire that makes I'm like a value shopper because I have kids now. So like, I try not to spend a lot of money on gear. So it's like, Squire makes these instruments that are like, they sound really good for like $400 and they play well. So I have two of those. Where is it? This Telecaster is a Squire classic vibe. And it sounds better than like some like $1,500, $2,000 tellies. It sounds better than those. So it's like, I'm always looking for, or like I'll go on Facebook Marketplace or, I'll buy used stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Just to keep it, keep the price down.
It's almost that vibe where like I've been studying like Japanese for like the last year, right? And definitely a big fan of the culture. And it's Duolingo. It's not that impressive, but it's one of those things. And I always get curious about this documentary film, Euro Dreams of Sushi.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing about sort of understanding, like you could have something that is sort of not the best piece of fish, but your technique and how you prepare it. That's what I'm thinking of when you're describing. It's like, look, it's good sound that comes out of this guitar. It's not a $2,000, guitar. It might be 400. It might be used, but sort of the technique, the skill, the attention that goes into playing it. I have like a little $99 recorder. I was like, I'm going to get good audio out of this.
Absolutely.
And, when I was teaching, I was sharing with you earlier, I used the really high-end lav Rode mics, the professional joints. I think I just got them. They were like 700. And then, I had the small recorder. And for show, I had the clip-ons, the lavs.
Yeah.
But for the actual recording, I used the one off the little Zoom $100 one. And my students were like, so you use those mics? I was like, no, the same ones we're demonstrating in class, the one that you have. So you can get really good quality out of it.
Yeah. I think that it's not, look, I think in some cases it depends on what it is, right?
Sure.
Sometimes you want some, I guess, high end stuff, but for what I do, I feel like it's not the tool. It's what do they say? It's not the tool. It's the carpenter. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that good art needs constraints, needs boundaries. You know what I mean? It needs like some people make some of the best shit with very little because that's all they have, and they learn it inside and out, and they get creative with it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like I also don't have the capacity just mentally to have a lot of equipment and be like, oh, well, like kudos to like anyone who has like a mic locker with like every mic known to man and like high end equipment. I mean, I'm not an engineer. I think I, you know, this isn't like a knock on people that have good equipment and know how to use it artistically. I'm not saying that. I just know for me, like I can squeeze something good out of something that's maybe thought of as not that good.
I hear you. It's the thing that I kept getting across in my class, and I really believe in it.
Yeah.
It's that notion. It's like having the right tool for the job. And before I move into this next question, I'll just say this. I remember when that sort of wave of the podcast boom, I saw every jerk with a microphone had the same Rodecaster. And I'm like, you don't even know how to use it. Why do you have that?
You know, it's funny. And I just got to say, and I have an SM7 beta.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, I had this MF back in early 2000s.
Yeah.
Before anybody, you know, and then all of a sudden, like 5 years ago or whatever, everyone's got one of these. I was like, I had it first.
Right.
And the reason I got it is because I read that Michael Jackson recorded Thriller with it.
Nice.
I don't know if that's the case, but it's, you know, it's like a $400 mic. I was like, okay, I can afford that, you know.
Yeah, like the mic that I'm recording through, it was a birthday present, you know, and it's a Shure mic. It's the Elvis mic. It just looks like one of those throwback joints. I was like, I like this a lot. It was $200, most expensive mic I've ever used, and I've been podcasting 15 years, and I don't have a $400 mic. And you know, when I see folks do, you know, sort of their lessons and give out their tips, you know how social media goes.
Yeah.
If you don't have $1,000 mic, you ain't doing anything, and it's just like.
No way. And you sound better than me.
Yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors. So I read that your work, and we're going to dive into this a bit.
Sure.
Your work, you pull from a lot of different influences. I saw anything from like Iggy Pop to Tim and Eric. How did these different influences like sort of show up in your work? And I have a second part to that question, but I'll give you that space.
Okay. Yeah. I like absurd. I like artists that use absurdity because I really relate to absurdity. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's always been a coping mechanism for me, I think. Like I remember when I was a kid and I saw Andy Kaufman on television.
Yeah.
I thought it was the funniest thing. And I was just like, this is so weird. Like, and he's doing it on TV, and some people get it and some people don't. And I don't know what's going on, but I like it.
Yeah.
Or like Emo Phillips. I'm dating myself again. And so like when Tim and Eric hit, I was like, oh my God, these guys are crazy. Like there's like, I like absurdity because I feel like, and you know, you mentioned Iggy Pop. I think Iggy Pop is that, but in a musical sense.
Sure.
You know, like he's got a song called I'm Bored, and it's just, you know, and the line is like, I'm bored. I'm the chairman of the board, you know, and it's like, I mean, come on, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that the things that we do and the things that, and I can only really speak on our, like the American culture,
sure,
which is a capitalist culture. You know, I think the things that we really hold near and dear, I think that is absurd. You know, I mean, and that's why, like, I kind of used Ears with Eyes as this platform of like, you know, I have a song called Reminders because my wife and I started a family and I was getting home at like 9, 10, 11 at night, like just working 12, 16-hour days. And she's like, can you put something, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention to the time. I keep missing it. And we have so much going. I keep missing the train. She's like, can you put something on your calendar that says, hey, start to pack up because my wife is going to lose it because we have a baby and I need help.
Yeah.
So I set myself a reminder and I thought to myself, that's fucking absurd. We're so dedicated to work and we just work, grind around the clock that we have to set reminders for ourselves to do basic human things.
Yeah.
Because we value work so much.
Mm-hmm.
That's absurd.
It's that thing where, I have my Apple Watch. It reminds me, get up every hour, move around. And I'm like, oh, right. I'm so locked in to this computer and this setup, almost like I'm plugged in. I know I made the reference to the sci-fi stuff earlier.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just sitting here engaged. So something normal, even like, this consideration of, do I have time to go to the bathroom? I have a meeting coming up.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that, like, yo, you got to go, you go. And I don't know. It's you're so on point there with, there's a lot of things that we value, and it's to kind of almost drain the battery. It's like, look, you might start working at 15. You retire, if you're lucky, at 65, 62, whatever. Essentially, you got 50 years of usability, and then you can die.
Right. Right. And that's basically, and then you have what? And it's not even 65, it's like 70s now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, but yeah, and I was talking to some other friends of mine who like working in corporate America. And this one friend of mine was like, yeah, I have to put pee breaks into my calendar because if I don't, it'll get filled up with other meetings. So I have to schedule my pee breaks. I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah.
That like we're so quote unquote productive that we have to schedule basic human functioning.
It's called like, corporate culture. It is sort of these corporate norms. And I think I'm feeling a little itchy because it's reminding me of why I had to get out of that setup. Like, for the better part of the last like 13 years, I've worked around like higher ed because it's not corporate, it's secure, it has these different elements, but when it starts to shift into what feels corporate and I can identify it pretty easily, I have to like try to do things to shift away from it because I have that distaste. And I don't like cubicles, I'm sure you have some thoughts on cubicles. I don't like conference calls or meetings. I'm sure you have some thoughts.
I love them now because the stage show. So it's me and it's my friend Johnny Taylor, who is the other half of Ears with Eyes. He does like, so I write the music and I send him the tracks, and he's like engineer extraordinaire. He's like, he just puts it all together and he basically triggers everything. And then I can do my song and dance and like, in gyrate on stage. But we set up like a cubicle. We have a cubicle wall and we set up like we're in an office.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the show, like, my shirt's off and I'm like breaking the table and it goes from like this sort of like crippled corporate worker to like this feral sort of Iggy Pop type personality. It's like, fuck this. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
That's great. Now I'm just visualizing as I'm talking to you. I'm just visualizing it in my head. That's great.
I'm like dad bod Iggy Pop because there's no way I would ever be able to look like Iggy Pop.
Yeah, I keep my shirt on all the time. Someone was like, "Yeah, you should do like the Bert Kreischer." I was like, "I won't at all, ever."
Oh, come on! I can see in your face. You work out. You have good bone structure. I have like a turkey neck.
Well, it's been an interesting year working out. But I think when it comes to something creative, and I've definitely like artistic, right? You're on a stage, you have this performance art that goes along with the music that's sequenced, and it's a collaborative thing. It is it's booking, as we talked about a little bit earlier. It's all of these other elements
Mm.
that maybe fall outside of, okay, I get to be on stage and get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get to make the music. How does sort of the regimented nature of maybe, you don't like the whole corporate America thing, it's not really your jam, but how does that structure and maybe some of those takeaways from being in that environment kind of serve you as, all right, I can see where this is useful. I can
Oh
see,
yeah.
yeah. Talk about that
Yeah.
a little.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I what I'm commenting on is how crazy corporate life can be
Yeah.
and how it can burn people out, you know, um, which is what essentially happened to me. And so I write about it. Um, but I'm not against being organized and disciplined. I mean, I think it's easier to be organized and disciplined when you love what you're doing,
Yeah.
you know? Um, I think that, or you have a vision or a goal. I mean, we don't, I do love it. Most days I can't remember the last time I was just like, I don't want to do this. Um, but, so when you're like working toward a goal,
Yeah.
it's just like it's like you have a daily, okay, I got to reach out to these venues today, or I got to put up a social media post. I got to like work on the copy for that, oh, I got to cut this video together from this live performance and then I'll put that up. So it's just, I think it's just, I think being regimented, I think you have to. Anything worth doing, I mean, I love the art, and there's also this sort of idea of like there's disciplined stuff and then there's undisciplined sort of like the creativity.
Yeah.
I just shoot from the hip. I get something in my head. Luckily, I feel lucky, and this is why I feel like I've always known that music is for me, because I just get it in my head.
Yeah.
It just comes from wherever. I'm just like, oh, that's a cool beat, or that's a cool sound. I'm going to try to make that sound, or I get a cool line or a title,
Yeah.
or just a phrase. And then I just start kind of riffing off that. And then there's like experimental time when it comes to creative. Like I think of it as like free play, right?
Yeah.
Like just like a child who's playing with toys, like I don't overthink it I used to overthink it. Like, oh, well, what about, but usually my instinct is what feels the best. And that's the best results from people who listen to it or see it, or like come to a performance. Usually my instincts are pretty good for what I'm doing.
Yeah. What is your relationship or your take on uncertainty? Like, do you see it as something that sort of helps drive your creativity? Is it, there's a challenge in there to try to navigate it? And how is it like show up like for in doing this? Like there's structure, there's questions, but when it feels like the questions are a little too canned, it's improv time. It is time to just riff and change the order, because I think things might fit different and better. And, for 10 years of my 15 years as a podcaster, I did an improv podcast where it's just like, we got some news stories. We're going to talk about it, but literally we haven't written any of this stuff down. And we're kind of playing Russian roulette with what stories we're going to talk about. And that's what it was. It's like, this story could be bad, but we don't know. So, there's being comfortable with uncertainty. So for you, what's your take on it?
I love it. I kind of feel like I thrive off it.
Yeah.
Like I remember I found out early on, probably like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years into playing music. A band I was in, we hadn't gotten together for months, and we had a show coming up, and we were like just so unprepared for the show.
Yeah.
And we just winged it. We played the songs that we know how to play, but we kind of purposely played them. We took it as an opportunity to like embrace the mistakes,
Yeah.
and we brought props, and we made this whole thing out of it. And I called it the Hindenburg show, because I'm like, we're gonna go down in flames. And it's going to be glorious. And ever since then, I was just like, I love that.
Yeah.
You know, like, you can only be so prepared. And I think being prepared is great. And I think there's a time to take it seriously, and there's a time to ask important questions about what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be too prepared, because I don't, and it's the same with writing. Quick decisions, instinct. I pivot quickly when I'm writing something and recording it. And I do it all at once. I very rarely sit there and with my guitar or whatever, like Ears with Eyes, there's hardly any guitar on it. Like, it's like synths and beats and sound design and random stuff, you know? So a lot of it is just kind of like finding my way through. And I've learned, for me, that the more I try to revise something and edit it, it sucks the human out of it. It becomes this sort of homogenized thing that just doesn't, kind of flatlines for me, you know?
I hear you. It's, you know, I've, when I was describing, like, when I was writing the questions, right, I was on the train coming back, going to New York and partially coming back. And what I found, because I felt like I lost something in terms of, like, writing my questions. I was feeling like, to your point, this feels like not real. It feels inauthentic. It feels like just kind of ugh. And it's like, I'm losing something in it that I'm not even interested and curious about. So I started just scrapping my questions. And early on, I would take so much from Still Like an Artist. I used to just get rid of my questions. I would delete the file after every 6 months. And I would just stack questions. Like, this is an interesting insight. How can I craft that towards this guest? What would they think about this? How does this fit for them? And maybe, you know, questions I'll return back to, but I would have this thing where I would get rid of them. And I found that more and more questions were showing up, or this really isn't that strong of an insight. And sometimes it's just like, you got to be able to just lock in. I would put on, like, Still Like an Artist, and literally I have the notepad in my hand right now. I came up with 40 questions on the train, and it's like I got hit with it. I'm like, oh shit, here's the flush, or, all of these questions.
Yeah.
And I've been able and fortunate enough to tie some of them in, and even work in things like this next question I'm going to ask you, but work in things that are definitely me. You listen to interviews, or you listen to people, and you don't see any of them in it. It's almost like anyone can do that interview. Anyone can ask those questions.
Yeah. And you're like 800 episodes in, right? So it's like, or over 800 episodes. So it's like, it's probably, and that's just with this show. You said you were doing podcasting before that too, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you have years of kind of honing your craft to find your voice, right? Because it's, it's there, but you have to just do it and do it and do it for it to kind of, I don't know, like, hone it, I guess. Hone's the word, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that, and this kind of, for me, kind of comes in like how I said, like, I didn't really have a vision that I was like, oh yeah, this is me, until later in life.
Sure.
And I think it's because I started trusting my instinct. And I think in order to even have an instinct, at least for me, it's like I have to have a life that's been lived.
Yeah.
So that the instinct is even there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm always amazed at, like, a band like the Beatles or whatever, any young artist, and it's like, they were doing that when they were like mid-teens and teenagers. Like, there's no way I had a vision like that.
Right.
Or if I did, I didn't think it was good enough and I didn't trust it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was kind of all over the place with that, but
that's a good point. Like, what have you banked? We have this thing here, and it goes back to, and I definitely know we can get into the weeds in this one, but sort of this pressure to always be making something that goes back to the corporate thing, the productivity, that and something is lost when it comes to artistry there. I hear it all the time when it comes to, hey man, you haven't had an album out in a while, whatever artist that's a bit of a recluse, or man, it's like 7 years between records. Can this person have some experience that shows up in their work versus just churning it out? It's a product and it's less of an art versus just it's a commodity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's where the sort of, look, I comment and I say I use words like capitalist and capitalism, but I don't know anything else. I'm American, so I grew up in this. I
Yeah.
don't know. I can't say. I mean, there are really horrible things about capitalism,
Sure.
and then I don't know. I want to say there are some good things, and I think there are some good things. I mean, you can make a living, but that gets into a whole thing, right? Because there's sociopolitical, there's social issues there. There's all sorts of stuff,
Yeah.
right? So, where was I going with this? I think that this whole, like you said, art is a commodity.
Yeah.
I think making art is a beautiful thing. I think it's essential to humanity. I think it's
Sure.
essential for life, and I think everybody should do it.
Yeah.
But we say we value it, but as a culture, we don't,
Mm-hmm.
because what we value is money.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why you have, that's why we have the starving artist, right? Quote unquote starving artist. And that's why you have big name artists that have become sort of like, they become a brand, so it's like they have to sell other things and they have to do other things. They become this sort of entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But wouldn't it be great if, like, I as an artist, I don't care. I don't need to make millions and millions and billions of dollars. I just like to be able to pay my bills,
Yeah.
and keep the lights on and make sure the family can eat. We don't need a lot.
That's the thing. Like, and that's a really good insight where, when I do this and, I find like when I talk to artists, 90% of the time, they're like, man, you get it. You enjoy it. You enjoy what you're doing and you're very serious about it. And you're not taking yourself too serious, but you're very serious about what you do. And when I talk to folks that are more on that sort of cultural or creative economy, that sort of side of things, it's how are you monetizing it? It's
Yeah.
not are you enjoying it? How are you making money from it? And I'm like, well, I own my equipment. I own my home studio. So I think I'm all set. And it's this sort of cookie cutter, this is how you do it. And, I see it all the time, as I was touching on earlier with data. And, we play the Spotify games, play all these different things. And you can just see that some of the stuff is rigged, that anyone can pop up in a podcast. Anyone can sort of hack the algorithms to have their music seem like it's doing much better than it actually is. So I try to exclude a lot of that stuff and just ask the person, are you enjoying it? Do you like what you're doing? And
Yeah.
what I've heard from you, you enjoy. You get to pop off and have dad bod Iggy Pop up on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. And it's weird. It's just playing and writing and performing has been a big sort of guiding light in my life for 30 years.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it longer than I've not been doing it. I started when I was 14, so I've tried to quit because of how I viewed success and how, like, I haven't made it. I was supposed to make it by this age or this time or whatever. And what's wrong with me? I'm just going to quit. And man, you don't want to be around me if I can't do this. Like, what, Lori, she's like, she can tell like if I'm in a bad mood, and she's like, when was the last time you like picked up your guitar? Or it's like, oh yeah, it's been a few months. She's like, maybe you should do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it's who I am at this point. You know what I mean? Um, and it's just something that's really a part of my life.
That's that's great. I feel you. And I find when I have those moments where, at a point, my high watermark in a week was 18 interviews, and I did 6 in one day was sort of the high mark in a day and a high
Yeah.
mark in a week, right? And they weren't the same week. So it wasn't like that 6 episode in a day was a part of that 18 episode week. They were different things.
Yeah.
And then I find like, I did this talk for Creative Mornings a couple years back, and I got a lot of questions, and folks were like, "So talk about this pace. Like you're putting out a lot of stuff. Like when are you taking a break?" And that workaholic thing was there, and I was like, "Oh right, I should take a break. What's a break?" And realizing that okay, you do got to give yourself a little time to breathe and come back with some fresh perspective. But when you're in it and you love it and you identify with it. I talk. I'm a podcast nerd. This is what I do,
Yeah.
and this is my longest, most stable relationship. And when I go into it, that's what it is. But now I've made space to do other things that are connected, whether it be dotted line, whether it be very intimately connected. The teaching thing I mentioned earlier, sort of these paid gigs, this travel that all connects to it, because we do so many different things. You can't do everything. Like there are times in the past, Dr. Manhattan style, I would try to split myself to do multiple podcasts at the same time. And it's like, you can't do that. You're bugging because of it, because you're chasing it. But, at a point you have to realize like, all right, maybe tone that down a skosh, but don't just take what feels like a hiatus because you identify with it so much. And, that other podcast that I was referring to that I do, that's a different set of muscles.
Yeah.
And my partner, she's like, you need to find an outlet to be able to do that because that's where your comedic chops come in, your pop culture stuff. Like this is very much interview and it's, satisfying curiosity. And some of the comedic stuff comes in. And this next question definitely hits this pop culture thing. And so I have this thing, right? I love the movie RoboCop. I love movies from the late 80s.
Yeah.
And RoboCop, Predator, all of this is always something, right? And there's a story about the writer, like, was it Ed Neumeyer? It's just like this whole theme in the movie is baked in the writing and then throughout the movie of like, corporations aren't great. And his sort of hatred of his own day job.
Yeah.
As it relates to your creative work, and I think we touched on it, like, what is the sort of outside of maybe money, but what insecurity, I guess, in insurance, but what is sort of the value of a day job? Is it the socializing? Is it, sort of those different pieces? And I think over the last few years, some of that it's changed, more remote work and things of that nature. But what would you say are some of the values of being in the corporate sort of setting?
Man, that's a tough question. Good movie, by the way.
It's a stellar movie.
When they, when he gets shot up, what like thousands of bullets or something. Like he's just this. It's like they just he's like gone. It's crazy, which is why he becomes RoboCop.
This is true.
It's
a baptism by bullets. It's wild.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know. Other than like learning new skills, maybe having some sort of socializing to people. Yeah, I think money, security, insurance. But I think I don't look. There's absolutely nothing wrong with working or having a job. I think. I just wish there was more. Like, think of it this way.
Yeah.
You are very passionate about podcasting, right? And some people and some people get paid and they get sponsored and this and that, or they get picked up by a company, right? I just wouldn't it be good if there was some sort of mechanism in place where artists could be artists and actually make money at it. And it wasn't like I have to have a day job. You know what I mean? And maybe I'm probably just being, it's very idealistic. I know that's not the way the world works, but you know, for me, like when you know what you've wanted to do since you were a kid and you're still grinding trying to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to love it. Otherwise, why would you do it? You know? But wouldn't it be great to just ask the question, to not have to have a day job and just do that and be able to make a living at it? Yep. That's so for me, I guess this is a question. A day job. I haven't found a day job that is so fulfilling that it could replace music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I've again, you know, as you touched on sort of when you find yourself, and I'll share this. I think I've said this maybe once or twice in the 800 plus. It's been instances where I've tried to bring sort of this background, which, you know, it's almost 2 decades really of experience in this particular area, and try to bring it into the corporate setting because of the whole funding thing, the gap of funding ultimately. Mm-hmm. And I get burnt each time. It's either suppress who you are, change who you are. We know how to do it better, and there's money involved. So what do you know, and so on. And it doesn't work for me. It doesn't align. So I think at a point when I started understanding how funding works and having these conversations and these interviews, just getting other folks' insights and perspective on the art cycle, the funding cycle, and all of that, I was like, the day job is my funder. And I was like, how can I make sure that I am considerate of this thing? This is I don't have any kids. This is my baby, you know?
Yeah.
So how can I be considerate and have that towards the front and nurture it, make sure I'm getting better at it and all of that good stuff, while I'm able to make sure I have insurance, make sure I have those things that you mentioned. And I think what you mentioned is absolutely right. It's to kind of keep you full enough that you can pursue that dream. Because if you, like you said, if it's something that you have interest in and you've been chasing for a very long time, it's a dream, not in a dream that's unobtainable, but it's a dream. It's a desire.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. I think in a nutshell, a job is a means to an end for I think a lot of people, you know, even people who don't necessarily aren't grinding with something on the side.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, you know, I don't want to say, I don't know if this is true or not, but like, I don't think many people want to work as hard as they are working.
Preach.
just to pay the bills.
Yeah.
You know, because in many cases, people are just working they're just working all the time.
Yeah.
Just to keep the lights on, you know? And, I don't know. The older I get, I just want a balanced life.
Yeah.
You know?
So I want to move into sort of this last real question. And, you know, I'm curious about this. You know, can you tell us about, is it weird?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So speaking of monetizing.
But I think it's community. It's community is what you're building.
Well, yeah. And that's really kind of where it came from is, well, I make weird, what I think is bizarre music, and the stage show is bizarre. It's let me say non-traditional. Unconventional. Yes. And so, you know, I've met a few other bands. There's a band called Top Button. There's another band called Zed Star 7 in my area. Another guy, Preston Spurlock. So I'm finding people who make unconventional music. Another artist, Midnight Dental. This is all up in New York State, New York City, Hudson Valley area. And So we've kind of found each other and we've been booking shows together, but I'm like, I know there's bizarre people out there that make bizarre music, you know? And I personally, I finally, I don't know. It takes me a while to, it's like come to like an awareness of something sometimes. I'm just like, oh, I really like outsider music. Like I love Wesley Willis. I love Jandek. I love, um, uh, I don't know. The list goes on and on. Uh, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I love conceptual music like John Cage. I love Sonic Youth. I love, there's some people around the Baltimore area like Dan Deacon kind of makes weird stuff, and Future Islands and JPEG Mafia.
Nice.
There's these sort of underground people that make noise music, experimental music, sound collage, anything you can call unconventional, and that also just slips into mainstream stuff, right? Like production techniques and found sound and stuff like that. So, for me, it's like, well, maybe I could build a platform where, I can teach people. That's the other thing. The barrier to entry to do some of this stuff, it's all pure creativity.
Yeah.
You don't have to like learn an instrument for years, and there are very affordable, cost effective. If you have a computer, there are free DAWs, free digital audio workstations. There's plenty of free plugins and free sample libraries and and it doesn't have to be pristine like it came from a studio. In fact, like if it sounds even like crappy or like I quote crappy, I love the way that sounds. I like it when things sound lo-fi or distorted or just not polished.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me do a video series teaching people about certain genres and outsider artists, and then I'll have writing prompts that'll help them along to kind of stretch the boundaries of their creativity. Because that's the other thing. Over the years, I've listened to a lot of these bands and artists, and I'm just like, and that's influenced me,
Yeah.
It's helped me to kind of go past just by listening to certain artists. It changes you. You know what I mean? It changes you you're like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can't do that, but no way. Yeah. That guy's doing that. Like, like Wesley Willis, now he was mentally ill. He was schizophrenic, but his music is so honest and raw and you can tell that, he was just so in that moment when he was making it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what art should be, So yeah, I'm building this platform. I call it Weird, and it's like lowercase W, capital EAR.
Yeah. Branding.
And then lowercase D, because it's about, I can't get away from this ears thing. It's so lame. But yeah, and it's basically an online course that's about unconventional music and sound.
I love it. It's no gatekeeping here. I love that, and being able to quote unquote share the dark arts, and that's. We may have to talk about that. I may have to do my own version of that for podcasting, because there's a lot of goofy courses out there that aren't particularly good. And I'd rather give out the real stuff to help folks along. So thank you for sharing that. And that's kind of it, right? For the real questions.
Yeah.
But I got 3 rapid fire questions for you.
Sweet.
You'll indulge me, let's not overthink them. Let's just go into them. So here's the first one.
Yeah.
What was the first show or concert that you went to? Like one that sticks out from your youth? If you don't remember the first one, which one that sticks out from your youth?
Van Halen. It was like 1994 5. It was the Balance Tour. It's one of the reasons I became a guitar player was Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
I just he he was an amazing guitar player.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Do you have any superstitions or routines related to your work? I know some people, they go into their space. I've done it before. I put on a candle, like just to, kind of bless the space. Part of it is because I eat a little bit too much protein, and sometimes it's a little dicey in here. It's like, I can't invite anybody in now. I got to put this candle on. But for you, do you have any routines or superstitions as it relates to your work?
Geez, I don't think so. No, I don't.
Okay. Okay.
I can't think of any.
Because I'm curious about creative habits. Like when I read this book, and it was talking about, like, this is what Dali would do in the morning. This is what Andy Warhol would do in the morning. I need to have literally 3 eggs and 4 pieces of toast. Or Dali, I need to sleep with a spoon in my left hand. And I don't know, maybe it helps them with their process or something along those lines. But I'm very curious about the quirks and idiosyncrasies of like artists.
Well, I guess maybe more of a behavioral thing, but like, I don't like to spend a lot of time on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I like to get it done like when it's hitting.
Yeah.
And I don't like to think or edit stuff. I like the raw. This is, in my experience, for me, for what I'm doing, that's the best version of it.
Yeah.
I don't do multiple versions of things. I like to just go get it done. Also, I start to feel itchy when it's taking too long. I'm just like, this is
So what you're saying is we won't be fortunate to get the ears with eyes, like dirty versions or maxi 16-minute cut of certain tracks.
They're dirty as they are. They come dirty. They what you see is what you get.
The re-release version,
Warts and all, man.
version.
In fact, I want to do something that's like, and I might do this as a module to the course, but the 1 hour recording.
Yeah.
Like, just, you have 1 hour, just go, and then it's done, and then put it up on SoundCloud or whatever. That's it.
That's a good prompt. My final that I taught with my students of podcasting, I was like, well, we kind of worked up to it, but I was like, you guys are recording a podcast today. You got to do a 20-minute podcast.
Yeah.
Have these elements in it, but the rest of the stuff, how you get there, that's on you. And we're not really in studios. We're recording in unfamiliar spaces, but the acoustics are good enough to get audio. Have at it.
That's awesome.
And it was just, oh my God, I don't know what it is. Like, I'll be around. So here's the last one. And this falls into that vein of routines, right? This is slightly different because I know you have something for this. What is your go-to meal?
My go-to meal, I have to remember to eat, honestly, especially if I'm in a creative zone in writing, hours will go by. And then, I'll sit back and be like, oh man, I've been going here for like 4 hours and I haven't eaten lunch or whatever. Just so go-to meal as a creative or just in general?
Just in general.
Lately, it's peanut butter and banana sandwich.
You know what? That actually slaps. There's good macros on that one.
just because it's quick.
Yeah.
And it holds me for a little while.
Peanut butter will do that for you. Definitely. I make a smoothie, which is
ridiculous.
Yeah. I make a smoothie and it has each of those. It has peanut butter, jelly, and bananas in it, and it literally just tastes like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's delicious.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Full for a while.
Oh, you know what else is good? Just slicing some apple. And I don't use peanut butter. I usually get like what my kids call the nature kind. It's no sugar. It's just peanuts and salt and oil.
Yeah.
And just cut up an apple and dip it in there. And it's almost like eating peanut butter and jelly with the fruit, Yeah.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And as you can tell, I'm getting hungry. It's almost dinner time for me.
Yeah, me too. I gotta get on the stick and cook.
I hear you. So let's close out there because we're two busy men and needs to get on get your own things. So as we close out here, one, I want to thank you for coming on and spending some time with me. This has been a joy. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check you out, social media, website, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Oh, awesome, dude. Thank you so much. I love this podcast. I would, if you come up to this, I'm sure you'll be up to New York City again. Hit me up. We'll grab a bite or something.
Sounds good. All right.
It's just earswitheyes.com, and it's got all my social stuff on there. Instagram, I'm on there quite a bit. That's earswitheyes.music is my handle. And you can stream my music right on my website. And if you want to, there's a thing for Weird on there if you're interested in updates about the class. It's in development right now, but I'm doing some free downloads like infographics or like presentations on certain artists and checklists on writing and setting up your studio and stuff like that.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Ryan Havers for coming on to the podcast. And that is Ryan Havers, Ears with Eyes. And be sure to check out Ryan's website, earswitheyes.com, to stay up on all of the happenings. And for Ryan Havers, I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.